Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.
And he heaves it down the field. Jump ball. Deflected. Good! Good! Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown, Dartmouth!
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. As Tommy Palmer just told you in the introduction, we are the online sports guys. I need to call us the online sports guys instead of saying we are the OSG. Stop pointing down there, John. That could be interpreted the wrong way.
Well, that's where you are as we're doing the video portion of this.
Yes. For those of you not watching on YouTube on our video channel for the video version of this podcast, John's pointing downwards, camera down, so to speak, while we're talking here.
Correct.
But alas, not enough of that. We are here to talk college football. We are the OSG, the online sports guys. I am OSG Phil. He is OSG Nelson.
Check.
And John, we have some breaking news.
Yep, Willie Taggart has been relieved of duties from Florida State University, and his buyout, and I had to actually research this yesterday after the loss to the Orange and Green team in South Florida as the Florida State alum on the show, $17 million.
Well,
Willie Taggart.
According to our friends here at ESPN, the school raised $20 million in private donations to buy him out.
Yeah, if it was after this season, it was 17. It's 85% of the remaining salary on the contract. So let's see if there's 1.25. So yeah, it would be.
Yeah, it's remaining
like
this season.
It's prorated this season, so yeah, it's 20. So congratulations. And when people are referring to Willie Taggart in the same conversations as former Florida State head coach Daryl Mudra, who went 4-18 in 1974 and 1975. And this was before the weekend. This was leading into just how bad things were when you have Florida State fans, alums, what have you, putting Willie Taggart in the same conversation as Daryl Mudra. It's time to go. Daryl Mudra was the sandwich coach after Bill Peterson retired in 1973. Mudra had 2 seasons, and then they brought in some guy named Bobby Bowden. And if you count Bowden's retirement as a retirement when he left, this is the first time that in 40-something years, Florida State has fired a head football coach. And so now they start over. Odell Haggins, who I will maintain should have been the head coach.
And you can make a pretty darn good argument for it.
I would maintain that Odell should have been the head coach and named such after the quitter left to go to Texas A&M. And Odell coached in the bowl game, which I believe was the one in Shreveport at the time. And then you bring in Willie Taggart. Odell Haggins, the good soldier, is now going to be the interim coach for the remainder of the season. And for Florida State to gain bowl eligibility and finish the season at 6-6, they have to win 2 of 3. And the toughest one in that bunch is going to be in Chestnut Hill this upcoming weekend as Florida State travels to Boston College. Alabama State comes in, and that's your homecoming game. And then you have the game against the University of South Georgia Gainesville campus as the last game of the year. And that's where right now, that's where Florida State is at 4-5. It was clear that, and I'm trying to be as matter of fact about this without letting the frustration of being an alum come through here and all of this. The best way that I can phrase it is that Willie Taggart seemed to be out of his league when it came to coaching Florida State University. You blame conditioning for losses against Boise. You blame, it was conditioning
for most of the games.
Right, but Willie Taggart did not phrase it as such. It was conditioning. It was I'm going to so it was conditioning, and there were two other things that he blamed. It was the basically it ended up being the players themselves, the training staff, and then the want to gene, basically. And so when you are having that as your conversation, and it was three different things that Willie Taggart blamed, and none of them had to do with the coaching staff whatsoever, when really the coaching staff, I think, tried to do things that they didn't have the personnel to do, and they continued to try to do them instead of getting back to basics and running the football and just getting Florida State back to 33 wham, 34 wham, keeping your quarterbacks upright, not bringing in guys like Alex Hornibrook to try to put Band-Aids over an issue, and that would just bad move after bad move after bad move. And when you're trying to deal from the back of the playbook at the same time, it's just not things that are beneficial for any kind of success. And I will one more thing, and I'll continue to maintain that Florida State will have lost an entire decade of being competitive in the ACC from these three moves that will be made, the first two being the quitter leaving and 2 years of wasted with Willie Taggart.
The Willie Taggart buyout is now the second largest buyout in college football history, and in a statement released by Florida State University, quote, FSU President John Thrasher, I think very highly of Coach Taggart and wish him well. But in the interest of the university, we had no choice but to make a change. And yeah, when you're a Florida State, a team with a pretty rich football history, and you've been with a coach for 21 games, 9-12, 6-9 in ACC play, not competitive even in games that you've barely won. There's a big rebuilding project ahead. The question being, as much as I like Odell Haggins, and I think he probably would be a great hire for them over the long haul, the question is, after what's happened under the Willie Taggart watch, are the Florida State faithful going to be patient enough to wait for Odell Haggins to learn on the job and grow the program?
And that's the thing, is I think that Odell would get a longer leash because he's part of the Bowden family tree and as part of the Florida State tree in general. I think he would get a bit of a leash, but Odell is not the kind of shiny object that programs are chasing after these days. And so that's the larger issue in all of this. Should Odell be the head coach? Yes. Will Odell get much of a shot? I mean, he might be financially feasible because of having to drop $20 million on Willie Taggart. I think that might be the part of the issue is, do you just dial everything back and let it be Odell Haggins for, sign him to a 5, pay him a couple of million a year, and knowing that he's going to be a bridge to someone else? I think that's the larger question.
Right. And let's shoot down any hopes, aspirations, or otherwise. No, Urban Meyer is not coming to take the Florida State job in Tallahassee.
No. And I don't think anybody would ever allow it unless you're an outsider with a boatload of money, to have that gentleman be in the discussion to take over the program in Tallahassee. Is just
that rumor, full well somebody from the West Coast or up in the Northeast is going to float that rumor because he's out there. And this is a high-profile opening, but I think there's other fish to fry for him.
Southern Cal.
Yeah, among other things. And so, this kind of highlights was what we could only call a otherwise lackluster week of college football because so many teams were on the bye.
Yep.
Excuse me. Really, were there any games that jumped off the page to you? The only one that I wrote, obviously the game everybody talked about because it was really the only game matching up highly ranked teams, would be the Georgia-Florida game. That game was kind of a little bit of an old-fashioned slugfest. Georgia got to prove a little bit that maybe they're not dead yet.
Yeah, extremely sleepy, but
the win pretty much guarantees them SEC East title and
Right.
a date in December in Atlanta versus the winner of this coming week's game between Alabama and LSU.
Right.
The other part of that, it knocks Florida back a peg. Georgia kind of physically overpowered them a little bit in this game. They just kind of took them to the woodshed, for lack of a better way to put it.
And a lot of folks are pointing at Todd Grantham as well for his lack of defensive coordinating prowess in the game too.
Well, but Todd Grantham doesn't line up on the line.
No,
doesn't rush the quarterback and doesn't cover the wide receivers.
No.
So how do you blame a coach for something that may or may not have been his fault? Then again, I know
the shiny object.
It's a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Couple other games of note this week. Where is my list? Game matching ranked teams. This was one that was pretty exciting. I didn't get to see a whole lot of it, but as Conference USA games go, it featured a lot of offense. And that's SMU versus Memphis.
Oh, it was tremendous.
Great game. A lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. And when you look at these particular two, I mean, it was a game that every time you thought SMU was done, SMU would come back in the fourth quarter. And I think it speaks a lot about what we're seeing right now with SMU and with Memphis. So, and the American in general. So I think that when you have, I think it was over 1,200 yards of total offense with both of these teams, they're doing some tremendous stuff right now.
1,067 to be exact.
Thank you. Okay, so it's both over 500, not both over 600. But yeah, I mean, when you always thought in the fourth quarter that Memphis was distancing themselves out, then all of a sudden, 3 scores later, SMU is back within 6. And then it was an amazing back and forth, and it was a great listen to what we got to hear from those two schools. I admit I was going back and forth between play-by-play calls, both home play-by-play calls. And so it was tremendous stuff. But yeah, I think that you'll see both of those teams in some higher than normal bowls. They won't be a part of the New Year's Six, obviously. But when you're looking at what both of those programs have done to get to where they are, it was a fun night in Memphis. Sold out Liberty Bowl. Great visuals too.
Oh yeah, I mean, props to the folks in Memphis hosting game day for the first time ever. They came out en masse on Beale Street for that. And then they put on a hell of a show.
Yep.
The other game featuring another team that was undefeated going into this week, and yes, I'm going to talk about it, and that's the Appalachian State Georgia Southern Eagles game.
Attaboy.
There had been talk Appalachian State could potentially be that team going to the Cotton Bowl in the Group of 6 game. That ended when the Georgia Southern Eagles put on a bit of a clinic,
defensive
counting
clinic,
their arch rivals Appalachian State 24-21 up in a rough weather conditions up in Boone, North Carolina. Huge game for Georgia Southern running back Wesley Kennedy, 13 carries, 140 yards, and a pair of touchdowns.
Benedictine.
Not much else you can really say there?
No, I'm with you. No, it was a tremendous defensive effort for Georgia Southern. And it wasn't until the last offensive possession for App State in the second quarter where they really showed any kind of progress offensively. And it was when they broke out the quick passes and worked their way to the boundaries and finally got their way down the field. That was the first time that really App State showed anything offensively. So I just you tip your hat to the Eagles' elbow. And what you're seeing from Chad Lunsford, and they're adding pieces to it. Quality win for the second year in a row, knocking off a ranked App State team.
And then there's some big news out west. Want to talk about the West a little bit. 12, a conference that we all kind of wrote off over the last few weeks. Right. Maybe having a little bit of a renaissance here with both Utah and Oregon winning their games. Big win for the Utes, traveling up to Seattle to play Washington, and another excellent game. 33-28 win. Tyler Huntley with a nice performance, 19 for 24, 284 and a touchdown, ran for another touchdown. The one thing that people had said about Utah is there were questions about the offense. The offense came into play in this game. That's a pretty quality win for the Utes.
Yeah, and it was a back and forth, and it's these kind of wins when you're going up against a team that's 5-3 but has shown flashes, and everybody's wondering, okay, you're at number 9. Are you worth that number 9 ranking? And it was definitely a gut check for the University of Utah, and quality win for them as well. And then when you look at the other game in the Pac-12, 10-14 or however many schools they have these days.
The Pac large number of schools.
Yes, the Pac plus Baker's dozen plus. When Oregon puts that kind of a number on USC, obviously that resurrects the career dissipation light for Clay Helton, and the black helicopter theories as to why Urban Meyer is still there in Los Angeles for Big Fox Saturday. That's definitely the specter of him hovering over that campus and that stadium. Certainly a business has picked back up, quoting old JR.
Yeah, and you see Oregon at number 7. You see Utah at number 9, and are either one of them potential college football? I'm struggling with words here today. Are you looking at either one of them teams? Either one of those teams potential college football playoff contenders?
They would have to win out, and folks above them would have to lose. I think that I think it's going to be one of the two, but not both.
No, they still have to play in the Pac-12.
Then you play in the Pac-12 championship game. One knocks out the other, and I know that sometimes in some conferences, if you lose to a team that's ranked higher than you, you don't fall a whole lot. But in other conferences, that's not quite the case. It's going to be the winner of the Pac-12 championship game. They're going to be right there at the bottom in the fringes. I don't think they're going to make any other kind of an effort to leapfrog over anybody. So I think that that's pretty much where they're going to be, is in that 7-9 range, maybe getting in as the 8th team in an 8-team pick'em.
Well, you look at Oregon's resume. They lost to Auburn on the opening week, 27-21 on a super, super tight game. And Auburn's not a pushover for anybody.
No.
And they've run the table. They haven't had any games that have been that big of a challenge outside of a game against Washington, the 2 games against the Washington schools. And they finish it with Arizona at Arizona State and versus Oregon State, and very likely a game against Utah for the Pac-12 title. That they would be at that point, if they run the table, you're talking about a team 9-0 in the conference. You're talking about a team 11-1 overall.
Yeah.
They've got just as good of a case, if not better a case, than, say, in Oklahoma, if it comes down to that.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
And considering the quality of loss, remember, it's when you lose sometimes. It's not necessarily who you lose to.
Right.
And the fact that if Oregon runs the table from that first week loss and has gone and they push past Utah at that point, then there is the case that is to be made with the evidence that they have, Counselor.
Yep. And I think you're looking at a team that, if things fall their way, could potentially finally break the bubble for the Pac-12 and get them across the
finish line. At least on the outside, out of lane 8, and not necessarily being lane 4 or 5. Yeah.
And want to hit one last game before we go to the break here, because I just find it interesting. And we've talked about it briefly in the course of this, and that's the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, who realistically are the only team outside of Clemson in the ACC that's really even worth talking about.
Right.
Nice win, 44-10 over an NC State team that's mediocre at best, but Jamie Newman continues to put on a show whenever he's out there on the field. He threw for 3 TDs, ran for 2 more, and every time he's out there, Wake looks great.
Yeah, and you wonder now with NC State, you wonder where the questions are at quarterback and what Dave Doran is going to do to address the issue. When you look at what Wake Forest has been able to pull off this season, you tip your hat to them and you sit there and you go, okay, staying power for me is the biggest thing. And you look at Wake and then the possibility of stuff going down the stretch. Can you continue to keep the level of focus that you've had so far and then be that challenge for Clemson? And when it comes to people having discussions, doing anything when it comes to life in the ACC. So, Stan Cotton, friend of the network, has really had some fun games to call, and listened to a bit of Stan this past weekend as he was getting a lot of offense put on the board for Wake Forest. So Wake Forest is doing some studly stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they've still got their Clemson game coming up in a couple of weeks here. The chances of them winning that game probably aren't that big. Wake's got their game. They've got Clemson in a couple of weeks. They got to travel there. They can't get to the ACC title game unless they can beat Clemson,
which they won't.
But still, you're talking about a Wake team that could potentially go 10-2. That's not bad.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's a good run, and that means that they'll be on a New Year's Bowl. And good for Wake Forest to put a season like this together. We've seen them sporadically in the past where Wake Forest has been able to make the appearances on the late December, early January roll call of bowl games. And so this is kind of what I'm looking at, probably the 10-2 Wake Forest by the end of things. And so quality work out of Winston-Salem this year. I just want to see what a Clemson game looks like for Wake Forest, and what the I'm not going to say fallout, but what the impact is on their season, and can they take any confidence from that going forward into their bowl game that's going to happen in late December, early January.
With all that being said, let's wrap up here on the first block of the review. It's a look back at the college football weekend that was. Plenty of stuff to talk about. We had news at the beginning of the show with Willie Taggart. Joining us in the next block will be Brother Wilkie. And we will talk a little bit further about some of the games this week, plus look ahead as the field may be kind of sorting itself out over the next week or so. We'll talk the game of the century this week, this month, this year, this season, and a few news and notes as we go on and continue to review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
And it's awesome when you go out there, you prepare the right way, and also you perform the right way. So that was good.
Welcome back, everybody, to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. Joining me here for the second block of the show, it's Brother Wilkie. Hi, Brother Wilkie.
What's up, Brother Phil?
And for those of you looking for him on Twitter, you can find him at jwilkerson16. In the first block, Wilkie, John and I talked about Willie Taggart, the breaking news, cue sound effect. Florida State finding the money to buy out Mr. Taggart after a very crushing defeat versus the Miami Hurricanes. Your thoughts on the drastic move that some thought might be coming after the season, but certainly not during?
Yeah, but I think we're not shocked by this. This is what's interesting about this whole thing. Remember last year when Willie Taggart was hired, and the good feeling, I guess, having a Florida native, a guy that wanted to be there after
it was his dream
job.
job.
Yeah, his dream job after the Jimbo Fisher era ended the way it did, and welcoming Bobby Bowden back in the family, or like he ever left, but kind of opening the doors for him to come back and be a part of it. And everybody were talking recruiting and how he's going to own Florida and everything. And then they had the season opener on national television. I think it was Labor Day night against Virginia Tech. And within the first quarter, that whole momentum went from one extreme to the other. And people were looking at this like, what the heck is happening here? Did we make the right move? And it just snowballed from there. And it was unrecoverable. He could not recover from that first game of the 2018 season. That just set the tone to the Willie Taggart era at Florida State. So a couple observations here. One, I never dreamed I would see Florida State in a rebuild mode. And here they are in that mode. So where does Florida State go now as far as a coaching search? And I can tell you, I'm sure there's going to be the rumors of Urban Meyer coming to Tallahassee. He's going to be
no way.
Yeah, no way. And he's going to be linked to every job that's open, especially if Southern Cal opens. But does a former Gator coach go to the Tallahassee? That's the other interesting thing.
There's a better.
You're from Florida. You should know this.
There's a better chance of one of us being the head coach.
I got you. So the list is going to be. I mean, again, when's the last time Florida State has had this happen? Was probably right before they hired Bobby Bowden, because the coach before him, I think,
John talked about that in the first block. The comparisons to Daryl Mudra.
That's right. He was the head coach before Bobby Bowden. Trivia for you guys, for the faithful out there. But the thing is, this is an attractive job.
Oh yeah,
and you can win, and you can win quickly with the talent that they have to pick from in the Sunshine State and South Georgia, and either Southern Alabama as well. So it's going to be a really attractive job, and everybody who's got any kind of decent resume is going to be linked to this job. But there's a lot of pressure on the AD at Florida State to get this right now, because
no room for error here.
Yeah, there's no room for error at all. And so is a Mike Norvell going to be a hot commodity in Tallahassee? Guys like that, they're not going to find a offensive coordinator from a Power 5 school. They're going to want a guy, if they've had some success at the Group of 5 level, at the very least. Dana Holgerson comes to mind too. Would he consider making the move from Houston to Florida State? I mean, I'm just throwing that name out there. Probably someone from the NFL will probably be considered as well. So
when John and I discussed, what about Odell? Interim coach Odell Higgins, his second go around as being the interim coach for the Seminoles. He's part of the family. He's cheap. With the $20 million that Florida State's having to come up with to buy out Taggart, he may be not a long-term solution to the problem, but it could be a short-term solution for the problem if the guys are willing to play for him.
Right, but is he going to be the sexy pick that's going to get the recruits, the 5 stars or the 4 stars, to come to Florida State? And I think we all know the answer to that question. That's not going to happen. Odell Higgins has got a pretty favorable schedule to go. They go to Boston College. Boston College looked great against Syracuse, but Syracuse is in a much worse shape than Florida State right now. And they really made Boston College look good, which their offense is decent, but BC's defense has been awful. Then Alabama State, and then at Florida. And so there's an outside shot of at least getting that 6-win mark and going to postseason. It's going to be a tall stretch when your only home game is Alabama State. But I just don't see that being a viable option for Florida State to hire from within, especially somebody that is a Seminole legacy. They're going to go after a big name, and they're going to throw some major dollars around because they have to. I mean, some of these boosters are going to have to write some very large checks to keep this program in the upper level. And I think it's going to take a few years for Florida State to challenge Clemson in the ACC Atlantic. And this is awful timing for a conference that really depends on Florida State to be Florida State, especially since you've started your own network.
Yeah, in a big way. Want to touch base about another coach who's probably feels his seat getting a little bit warm too, and it's close to your heart, a team that you know well, the Arkansas Razorbacks with Chad Morris. And what's going on there? Is he going to survive this?
I don't know if he's going to survive this or not. And that's the interesting thing about the Willie Taggart firing today or on Sunday. The precedent's been set for a coach and is going into his second year, halfway through his second year, being let go. And, you know, my observation is, especially after watching the Mississippi State game, they quit on him. And the quarterback handling of the quarterback situation has been very disappointing to me. Nick Starkel, Ben Hicks have just not produced. Then you get John Stephen Jones in there, and he looks really good. He looks like he can make some big throws, and he can tuck and run when he has to. The other two have not proven that, and he hasn't made mistakes. Then you get KJ Jefferson in there, and he looks phenomenal. He kind of looks like that Taj Boy, Deshaun Watson type that Chad Morris had at Clemson and was successful with. And it'll be interesting to see if next week one of those guys gets the start. I would like to see John Stephen Jones get the start, and I'd like to see KJ Jefferson get some time and maybe get a start in one of the last couple of games. But then where does Arkansas turn if they pull the trigger? Again, Mike Norvell is out there. A lot of people in Arkansas wanted Norvell the first time around. Gus Malzahn, don't even think about it. He's not going to leave Auburn and come back home. It ain't happening. It wasn't going to happen when they hired Chad Morris. It ain't going to happen now. Mike Gundy, to me, would be a name for both Florida State and Arkansas, should Arkansas pull the trigger, as a possibility at either one of those programs.
Here's one for either one of them, too. The Pirate himself, Mike Leach.
Mike Leach would... I think Mike Leach would be a great pick for either one of them. I think a better fit at Arkansas that really needs some positive PR and really needs, you know, some kind of charismatic character to get those big time athletes with an offensive pedigree to come in there and do the job. I don't think it'd be a good fit in Tallahassee. That'd be kind of wild.
Little too cutthroat for his style.
Exactly. But, you know, UCLA with Chad Kelly, is that marriage right now happy?
Yeah, that's another job that may come open here.
Yeah, because he's in his second year. And, you know, we're at that point with the early signing period where moves are going to have to be made this week and next week. So it's, you know, we may see some coaching movement here soon.
The carousel that usually starts the first week in December, maybe starting here early in November, it sounds like.
Right.
Florida State setting the bar. The question is anybody else going to go there? A couple other things I want to hit here before we wrap up the show this week. And speaking of college football jobs, word gets out this weekend that Alabama special consultant Butch Jones is interviewing for the Rutgers job.
Rutgers, yeah. You know, really, who isn't interviewing for the Rutgers job? I thought Greg Schiano was the slam dunk to come back and put the paddles to that program. Butch Jones would be kind of interesting.
Yes.
But, you know, Rutgers is a desperate program right now. And, you know, Butch Jones had, one decent season at Tennessee?
But he also had some success in the Mid-American Conference.
Yes.
He has a track record of taking mid-majors and making them into something. So maybe he's at least something to give that program a pulse.
Yeah, that's a tough job. I mean, that is just a really tough job. And, you know, that's why I thought going after Greg Schiano again, because he had success in his time at Rutgers. He was able to keep some of the Jersey boys home. He speaks the language. He looks, you know, he's got the pedigree. I would think someone like him would be perfect to come back, or even somebody with that kind of background. I know there's another name that was out there, and I can't think of him right now for Rutgers, but it had some Eastern ties to it. But I think you've got to have that to be successful at Rutgers and keep the Jersey boys home, because there is some talent in that state.
Oh yeah, look at the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world who recruit that state heavily, and get some
right.
of their.
Tom Osborne used to get some great athletes out of the Jersey area, and and I mean, there's talent there that they just got to get them to stay home.
Yeah, the name that comes to mind to me is DeAndre Swift at Georgia, who's from Philadelphia.
Right, just outside of Jersey. Yeah, you have the Philly area too. Yeah, I mean, there's in Eastern Pennsylvania. I mean, you're just really right across the river, and you can tap into northern New Jersey and Long Island. I mean, there's possibilities there that coaches for some reason just can't get them to stay home.
Want to hit one other thing here before we wrap things up, because it made me laugh, and it was one of the better things I've seen in college football this season, and that's at North Texas State, a team that has had a little bit of a disappointing season. They haven't been great, but they have had some highlights, and they've got a pretty darn good quarterback in Mason Fine.
Yes, he is outstanding.
And the reason I bring him up is this. This past weekend, the Mean Green won their game. It was a nice win over UTEP, 52-26. Fine had a huge game, 7 touchdown passes, huge numbers, a big win for North Texas State. He went 24 for 39, 332, and 7 TDs, but it's not what happened on the field that got everybody's attention. It's what happened after the game when, for those of you not watching the video podcast, he showed up wearing a T-Rex costume.
Just continue to be who I am. With adversity, it's not asking more of me. It's not asking me to be different. It's not asking me to do extra stuff. I just stay who I am and show guys that, it hasn't went our way, but that's not going to stop my work ethic. That's not going to stop me performing. I'm going to continue to just be hard and continue to do what we've been doing. And
Man's got some charisma, doesn't he? I tell you, he's one of the quarterbacks I enjoy watching, and he'll probably get into an NFL combine. He's got those kind of skills. He's got some nice size to him, but you put up you're 24 or 39. You don't throw an interception. Well, it was UTEP, and they're pretty suspect in the pass defense. And I'm not sure.
Perennial bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. And I was looking at some video real fast, and there's very little pass rush on Mason Fine, so he could sit back there and pick his targets. But that kid can flat out play, and I like the personality that he showed after the game. That's really cool. And of course, you're right about the disappointing season. 4-5 for North Texas. It's going to be tough for them to get into a bowl game. This is a program that is used to playing after Christmas, and it just hasn't happened this year for the Mean Green. And with let's see, they have in the last 3 games, 2 of them are road games at La Tech, at Rice, and then they close at home against UAB. It's going to be there's just no margin of error for the Mean Green if they're going to go bowling again.
And one last game I want to talk about. I don't know if you even know about this, and it's a game out of the Ivy League. Dartmouth versus Harvard. Dartmouth going into the game undefeated. Harvard 4-3. An Ivy League showdown that was going late into the game. The score was 6-3. Harvard had the lead. An old-fashioned slobber knocker. Nobody could score a point until the very last play of the game, when Derek Kyler throws a touchdown pass to Masaki Ayerts, 43 yards.
Takes the snap. He's quickly got to throw it. Rolling to his right. He's got to get rid of it, and he's going to keep it going. Now he's going to throw it deep, and he heaves it down the field. Jump ball. Deflected. Good! Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown, Dartmouth! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Unbelievable!
Hail Mary. It's a touchdown. Game over. Dartmouth wins.
And I'm just watching it right now. That's a great throw, great catch. It is outstanding for a game to end like that. An Ivy League game that looked like it was played back in the 1920s or the 1910s rather than the 2010s. But you know, what do you expect from Ivy League football? It's tough, hard-nosed. It's really cool. And before we go, Phil, I got to salute your Georgia Southern Eagles with a huge upset over App State. We had Russ Brown from the Georgia Southern Radio Network on our Rivalries and Trophy Game show. And he didn't sound really optimistic, but he thought they could pull it off. And the Eagles pulled it off. That's a great win for your alma mater.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that. And John and I talked about that a little bit in the first block, too. A huge performance by the Georgia Southern defense, keeping a high-octane App State offense under control for a large portion of the game. A game played in super windy and cold and blustery conditions up in Boone.
Yes.
And there was talk about App State being a potential Cotton Bowl level team sneaking into that group of 6 game. That may not happen now. Leaves the Sun Belt kind of wide open. But yes, it was a huge win for what's better rivalries that people don't know about in college football that dates back a lot longer than you would think.
Yep, deeper in hate. That's what they call it. So we've talked about John's alma mater, Florida State. We talked about yours. Mine, well, Missouri State lost to South Dakota State 35-14. So my Missouri State Bears are now 1-7 on the year.
Oof, tough year.
Yes.
Tough year.
Yes.
Anything else you want to hit before we wrap things up?
Not really. It looked like chalk held again. And it'll be interesting to see where the college football playoff rankings will be released Tuesday. Who will be your top 4? And I imagine, it'll be LSU and Alabama 1 and 2, so you can have that matchup this Saturday. And I'm sure Clemson will be in the mix at 3 or 4, and Ohio State should be the other. So that should be your top 4 in week 1 of the college football playoff poll. But I guarantee LSU and Alabama are going to be 1-2.
Oh, yes. And like everybody else, next week on the review, we will talk about the game of the century this week, this month, this season in the SEC and in the free civilized universe, and that being the LSU-Alabama game, a 3:30 kickoff Eastern time in Tuscaloosa, 2:30 Central time where Tuscaloosa actually is. A huge game and probably the highlight of the week. So make sure you stay tuned for that and more, and tell us a little bit, preview the rivalry and trophy game show for us, if you will.
Let me call it up, so you're going to have to kill some time here.
Sorry, I threw a curveball at you.
That's all right. That's all right. It's kind of a light rivalry and trophy game show, but some really good ones in the lower divisions. First of all, you've got the battle in the FBS. You got the Battle of the Bricks, Miami of Ohio against Ohio. You got the Victory Bell between Penn State and Minnesota, another Big Ten, Heartland Trophy, Iowa and Wisconsin. And you got the Shula Bowl down in your neck of the woods, Phil, FIU and Florida Atlantic. In the FCS, we got the Little Brown Stein between Idaho and Montana, and the Harvest Bowl between Western Illinois and North Dakota State. Then Division II, Division III have some really good ones. The Anchor Bone Trophy in Michigan between Grand Valley State and Ferris State, and the Battle Axe between Bemidji State and Minnesota State Moorhead. And Division III, you've got the Bronze Turkey Trophy between Knox and Monmouth in Illinois, the 131st meeting between the two schools. How much you want to bet John's going to be talking to them? Then you've got the Drum between Occidental and Pomosa Pitzer out on the West Coast. It's the Troll between St. Olaf and Concordia. Bet you John will have that one too. And the Wooden Shoes Trophy between Hope and Kalamazoo College in Michigan. So you got to listen to find out which ones we're going to be talking about. We'll talk about them all, but we'll try to get some of those guys on our Rivalries and Trophy Game show. And last week we had a really great show last week with Georgia, Florida, with Kansas State. Wyatt Thompson from the K-State Radio Network joining us, as well as from Division II. So we'll keep it going.
All right. Stay tuned this week. That show should drop later in the week. And, of course, there's our poll and prediction show, the Dirty Dozen in the Bottom of the Barrel. That show will debut on Wednesday, as it does every week. Make sure you get the phone app. That's the OSG Sports phone app. It's free. You can get it on iTunes and at Google Play. And you can find us on social media at OSG Sports, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. You'll hear and you'll see this podcast on YouTube if you go look there. And you'll find the podcast on all your favorite podcasting networks. And if you download the app will let you know when a new show drops. So for Brother John, who is got off to run some errands at home, and for Brother Wilkie, I am Brother Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys, and you have been listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The Online Sports Guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.